Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to get into something really fascinating, the mechanics of how we actually change. We love to talk about change as this big, heroic act of courage. But what if, sometimes, it's not a choice at all? What if we're just compelled? Let's kick things off with one single sentence that kind of says it all. I ate one piece, and then I refused. This statement sounds so simple, right? But it's actually a window into a huge internal struggle, the kind that can completely shift your life's direction. It's not really about the food, is it? So, what's actually going on here? Okay, so the person who said this was talking about eating non-vegetarian food. They'd been doing it for a long, long time. But then one day, they ate a single piece and just stopped. That was it. But it wasn't some sudden surge of willpower. Nope. It was because an invisible scale inside them had finally, permanently tipped. And this is the absolute heart of it. That decision didn't come from a place of strength or bravery. It was much simpler than that. The feeling of guilt had just grown and grown until it was so heavy it completely crushed any enjoyment the person was getting. In a way, the choice was basically made for them. This whole story is a perfect example of something we could call the constant exposure effect. It's what happens when you're doing something you kind of suspect is wrong, and life just keeps poking you about it. You get confronted with another point of view again and again until you just can't ignore the poking anymore. So let's trace this path because it's really interesting. It all starts with you doing something you're already a little conflicted about. Then you keep getting exposed to a different idea. Maybe a friend says something, you read a book, or you hear a teaching. Over time, that exposure just builds up the guilt. And our minds, well, they hate feeling uncomfortable. They want balance. So eventually, the mind just pushes you to stop the action, simply to get rid of that awful feeling. It's a slow burn, but the end feels totally inevitable. And that's the bottom line, isn't it? Our minds are basically programmed to protect us, not just from physical harm, but from psychological pain. They will always search for a way to avoid feeling things like guilt and insecurity. And if giving up a habit you've had for years is the only way to find some peace and quiet inside your own head, well, that's the path your mind is going to take. But hold on, is that really the only way change happens? Are we always just worn down by guilt until we give in? Or are there other moments? Moments that demand something totally different, something like a sudden, bold leap of courage. So here you have it, the two big models for change. On one side, you've got that gradual compulsion. It's the slow burn we've been talking about, fueled by guilt, and it almost feels like you don't have a choice. Then on the other side, you have bold courage. This is the sudden leap. It feels risky. It's driven by pure will. Think of someone who just ups and quits their stable job one day to chase a dream. That's not a slow burn. That's a spark catching fire. This brings up a really cool question, though. Are those two things, compulsion and courage, really that separate? I mean, where does that bold courage even come from? Maybe it's not appearing out of thin air. Maybe it's actually the final explosive climax of that very same slow burn. You know? Perhaps the biggest leaps are only possible after a long, quiet buildup of frustration and dissatisfaction with the way things are. Thinking about our own internal states, our guilt, our courage, it naturally makes you zoom out and ask a much bigger question, one that's really at the heart of all philosophy. What is this all for? Is philosophy supposed to solve your personal problems, or is it supposed to solve the problems of the entire universe? A lot of ancient traditions, especially from the East, have a very clear answer. They say the focus has to be on you, the person who is doing the looking. The basic idea is that we're all walking around a bit unwell, or to use another analogy, we're kind of drunk on our own delusions and biases. So the goal of philosophy isn't to figure out the world, not at first. The goal is to sober up the person who's looking at it. And that's a huge contrast to what we could call the universe problem. This is the stuff of cosmology and deep metaphysics. It's about asking those gigantic external questions. Why is there something instead of nothing? How did all this get here? It's all about understanding the objective reality out there, totally separate from how we feel about it. But this brings us to the core argument for focusing on the human problem first. And the logic is just so simple and powerful. How can you possibly study the mountain if the person seeing the mountain is drunk? If your own tool for observation, your mind, is flawed or distorted, how can you ever trust what it's telling you about reality? Before you can see clearly, you have to sober up. And this leads us to our final and honestly most mind-bending idea of the day. What if getting sober is about more than just overcoming guilt or breaking bad habits? What if it's about questioning the very reality you're standing on? a spiritual teacher actually posed this very question. And it's a real challenge, because it goes right to the heart of everything we experience. We just assume that this world we see and touch is the real one. But how do we actually know that for sure? To make this less abstract, the teacher used this incredible analogy. Think about it. 3 hours ago, you might have been asleep, dreaming. And when you're in the dream, it feels 100% real. You don't question it for a second. It's only when you wake up that you realize, oh, that wasn't real. So if your mind is capable of creating such a totally convincing reality when you're asleep, then how can you be so absolutely positive that you're not in a different kind of dream right now? It's a wild thought to end on, isn't it? It suggests that the biggest change we can make isn't about what we do or how we feel, but about waking up from a reality we never even thought to question. Makes you think, doesn't it?